Thank you very much indeed for the kind words of invitation. And yes, the correct figure is 1 billion people. I'm very happy to be with you here this afternoon. I hope you can all hear me clearly. Yeah. So my name is Francis Quinn. I will start off by saying that I'm Irish, which means that I can speak English quickly. And so I would say that if it's a thing that I get carried away and start speaking too quickly, please, somebody somewhere, stick up their hand and say, Francis, can you slow down and just rewind a little bit, and we'll go back over the last couple of slides because we didn't understand. And I mean that most sincerely. Please don't let me get carried away. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I have not come to give you some sort of an ex cathedra lecture. So what that means is that if anybody has a question or a remark, somebody agrees or doesn't agree, it's even better. And then I would say, please, let's talk about that now, because what I would like to do is to profit from this occasion to exchange with you, explain to you what our vision is for sustainability, and, as I say, exchange with you on that subject over the next 30 minutes or so. And what I would say is that if you retain nothing else, then I would ask you just to retain what we have on the first slide. When we talk about L'Oréal's ambition, which is to gain the loyalty and trust of 1 billion new consumers over the next 10 years, sustainability is the roadmap. That's how we're going to get there. So what that means is, and I make no apologies for this, when I'm talking about sustainability, we're talking about a business challenge. We're not talking about some diluted form of altruism here, okay? This is a business roadmap for doubling the size of what is already a good-sized company. We're going to double the size of that company over the next 10 years. Now, the world that we're in today, as you all know, is a world that is undergoing profound mutation. Change is not the word, it's mutation. And it's mutation no matter what scale you look at it at. If you're looking at it from the point of view of economics, yeah? In China, people don't talk about an economic crisis. They don't talk about an economic crisis in Brazil. In fact, they don't even want to. Yet in Europe, especially if you're not living in Germany, outside of Germany, it's what most people talk about most of the day. Balance of economic power that's changing. Take a look at the world's demographics. The 1st of October this year, the world's population will reach the point of 7 billion. It will no longer be 6-point-something billion people. It'll be 7 billion on the 1st of October of this year. And you know as well as I do, these people, well, most of them are not in Switzerland, and they're not in Belgium. They're in places that are quite far away from here. And when you look at the environment, our environment has never been as challenged as it is today. And so that's the backdrop of profound economic, demographic, political, environmental change and mutation against which L'Oréal stands up and says, oh, and by the way, we're going to double the size of the company. So that means that there's a whole bunch of our stakeholders who have very legitimate questions like, so how are you going to do it? Yeah? And that's what we're here to talk about today. Now, the good news is that when it comes to sustainability, as an industry, we're in a very good position. I would say even pole position. And the reason is very simple. You go back 100,000 years, no cell phones, no computers, no cameras, you have beauty products. You go forward 100,000 years from now, Microsoft will have disappeared. Cell phones will be replaced by something else. The world will still have beauty in it. We have never known a single human civilization just today, never found one that didn't have some form of beauty ritual. Not one. So there's something that is innately linked to what it means to be human and to be civilized that makes our industry already a very sustainable industry. That's the first thing. Second thing is that when you look at any cosmetic product, you find in there essentially two big kinds of ingredients. You have those ingredients that are the fruit of Mother Nature. These are ingredients that come from a natural capital. You have those ingredients that come from science and technology, a man-made capital. And in our products, we're constantly formulating and reformulating and mixing those ingredients, taking something good from nature, we can use it, something from a laboratory that's good, we can use it. And that as well makes for a very sustainable industry. So the good news is that we're in a fairly good position. When it comes to L'Oréal, L'Oréal's 100 years old. Now, 100 years old, recognized as a responsible, ethical company, a member of the world's 100 most sustainable companies since the index was created 4 years ago. But beyond that, a company that's 100 years old. Not many companies make it to 100 years old. If you go to the CAC 40, a lot of French people in the room today, how many companies in the CAC 40 are 100 years old? Not even 1/3. You go to the Dow Jones in New York, it's not even 1/4. If you go to the Dow Jones Index in New York and say, well, how many companies are on the Dow Jones today that were there on the first day? The answer is 1. You all know. When I tell you, you all go say, but of course. But there's one company was there on day 1. The only one is still there today. General Electric. Of course it makes sense. Now it makes sense, right? Okay. So being around for 100 years means that we've understood something about what it means to be sustainable. And this is recognized. Yeah? You look at the very first formula, the Eugène Schuller, the founder of L'Oréal, who was a scientist. In his very first formula, what did he have? Remember this number. 6 ingredients. Of those 6 ingredients, it was a hair dyeing formula. Water and ammonia, okay. Second 2 were 2 synthetic dyes that he had invented himself. In other words, science and technology. And the other 2 ingredients, lecithin and egg yolk. Egg yolk is a great conditioner for your hair. Natural capital, man-made capital. Day 1. And it's not a coincidence. So, I am not going to tell you that the environment is not important when it comes to sustainability. You all know the environment is important. But what I will say is that the environment is a part of a sustainability strategy. Just part. It is not the whole thing, far from it. That said, it is very important. To show how seriously we do take the environment, we set ourselves a whole bunch of environmental targets. I'm going to talk to you about the 3 most important ones. We set ourselves a target on the basis 2005, 2015, 50% absolute reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, Scope 1, Scope 2. It is the most ambitious greenhouse gas reduction target of any company in any sector of activity anywhere in the world. 50% absolute reduction, while we're doubling the size of the company, huh? Yeah? Today, 2011, halfway down the road, we're at about 27%. So we're even a little bit ahead of schedule. 50% reduction in water consumption, 50% reduction in generated waste, the same. Extremely ambitious environmental targets. All of the cardboard that we use is certified, sustainably sourced, so we don't cut down any trees to make cardboard for our products, whether a brand claims it or not. Yeah, that's important to remember. Some brands claim because of their positioning, others don't claim. Well, it doesn't matter. Whether Longcom talks about it or not, their factories are working to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, their water consumption, their waste, etc. So environment we take very seriously, but as I say, sustainable development is also a huge societal challenge. And so what it means is you've got to ask yourself the question, a strategic question. What kind of sustainability do you want for your company? No 2 companies the same. Neither in size, neither in company culture, neither in the way they work. So what kind of sustainability are you going to develop for yourself? Now, you all know this diagram. This diagram was drawn up in 1987 by Madame Brundtland, former Prime Minister of Norway, the Brundtland Commission. When in 1987, she drew up this diagram, and she said that, well, it's actually very simple. If you want to be sustainable, what you need to consider are the 3 dimensions of your activity, the economic dimension, the environmental dimension, and the societal dimension. If you strike a balance between all 3, you're sustainable. Brilliant idea. Earth Summit at Rio de Janeiro, 1992. The report is officially accepted by humanity as this is how we want to develop. But there's a problem. We discussed this at lunchtime. There's a problem with the diagram. Look at what we have here. Madame Brundtland, she says that when you're considering your economic activity and your environment, you should do something that's viable. If it's not viable, don't do it. When you're looking at society and environment, you have to do something that's bearable, supportable, something that society is willing to put up with. And when you're looking at society and economy, well, it has to be something that's fair. Equitable was the word that she chose. The problem with those words these are the words of constraint. Don't do it if it's not viable. Don't do it if people aren't willing to put up with it. Don't do it if it's not fair. In other words, and she didn't mean to, Madame Brundtland made it look like sustainability was something that you do beyond your activity. Sure, you have your economic activity, but if you can do something that's viable, go ahead and do it. If it's not viable, don't do it. Do you understand what I'm saying? She made it look like sustainability was beyond what you do every day. And that is one of the reasons why I believe that sustainability wasn't actually broadly embraced back in 1992. It took a long time to get us to where we are today, with more and more companies writing sustainability reports, more and more indicators being requested by regulators, more and more rating agencies specifically set up to look into these kinds of parameters, because the language wasn't right. If you look at our roadmap, this is in the public domain, it's not a secret. Here's the roadmap for how we intend to grow L'Oreal. When we look at the economic and environmental positioning, we do not see the environment as a constraint. Not at all. We see it as a source of innovation. We see it as a source of growth. We see it as a net competitive advantage. And how do we do that? Every single ingredient that the group uses, we've already assessed it for its environmental impact. Every single one of them. How do we know? We started 20 years ago. The methods that we began developing 20 years ago in partnership with people like the OECD, today are the standard methods. So every single ingredient, its environmental impact is known. So that when a formulator sits down at L'Oreal, no matter what the brand is, a formulator sits down and he's going to do a new lipstick. He puts in his wax, he puts in his oil, puts in his pigment. As he's typing in the ingredients that he's thinking of using, immediately on the screen, he gets the environmental impact that's known for these ingredients, and the algorithm will calculate a probable environmental impact, which means that before he's done even any experiments at all, he already has a very good idea where he's going in terms of environmental impact for his formula. Today, we have 40% of our ingredients that come from natural resources. Of the remainder, 26% come from green chemistry. We started our green chemistry 15 years ago. Proxylan is a very good example of green chemistry. Proxylan is state-of-the-art anti-aging molecule, belongs to L'Oreal. The raw material to make Proxylan is a sugar that you get from tree bark. It's like maple syrup. You don't even have to cut the tree down. So you extract this sugar from the tree bark, two-step chemistry in a water-based medium, not in solvent. The result, Proxylan, state-of-the-art anti-aging molecule, very high added value, 100% biodegradable, no environmental impact. That's green chemistry. That today is 26% of our ingredients. Okay? So you can see that when it comes to, you want to have a discussion about the environment? Yeah, we do. Because we know that our competitors can't follow us on most of this. Because today, if you imagine for your company, if any of you here are formulators, sit down and ask your guys when you go home, for how many of our ingredients do we know the environmental impact? And how much would it cost to have them all done by the end of the year or by the end of next year? And you'll see. The other side, when you look at environment and society, it's not philosophical. Hard business. When you go to your local supermarket or your local hypermarket and you walk into the aisle where it's stacked up to here, okay, and you got 250 kinds of shampoos, or you got 300 different kinds of cookies, A, how do you pick the one you want? And B, what does it all mean? It's a real question. It's a question for every last single one of us, because we're all, remember, we're also consumers. Consumers asking that question ever more. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that you're seeing these small-sized supermarket outlets as they're trying to take apart this big model of this monstrous blind consumption and what it means to the individual. Because people don't recognize themselves in this. It's alien to them, and it alienates them. One of the reasons why the distributors these days are having so much economic problems. Times are very, very hard for these folks because people, they're not able to reconcile their consumption habits with the world that they live in. And trust me, this is not philosophical. From our point of view, there we have a card to play. Because we can say to them that, you know, L'Oreal is the world's first company in the world when it comes to human beauty, but not at the expense of the beauty of the natural world. That we can reconcile those two things. Well, there's not a lot of people can say that. Because, for example, if you're a car manufacturer, The object that you manufacture is about as unrecyclable as something can be. Right? You're constantly delocalizing production to the cheapest places that you can find, with all of the consequences that that has. And even with all of that, the damn thing won't go by itself anyway. You've got to go to most of the world's hotspots to find the petrol, with all of the things environmentally, socially, human rights that are associated with that. Then bring the petrol back. When you've done that, put the petrol into the car. The car then becomes the biggest source of pollution on the planet. Not real sustainable when it comes to a business model. It's really not. It's one of the reasons why General Motors went bust. Remember, they went bust. And the US government bought their debt and then put them back on the road again. Yeah? This is extremely important. How people relate to their environment. The third part, society and economy, two sides of the same coin. Two sides of the same coin. What becomes crucial here is to realize that for a company like L'Oreal, do you know how many countries we sell products in? Anybody get any idea? 160. 160. I wish it was. It's 130. Yeah, it's 130. How many products do we sell?
SKUs or types of products?
How many SKUs? No, how many products? Individual products.
So whether you have size 250 mil, 350 mil?
Yeah, how many products?
Probably about 15,000.
15,000? No, how many products do we sell in a year? How many products do we sell in a year?
Volume, value?
Units.
Number of units.
Probably about...
Put it to you this way. How many per second? Now you know it's a big number. It's 150 a second. On a 24/7 basis, huh? 150 every second. 5.4 billion a year. Last year. Right? And we're going to double that in the next 10 years. 150 products a second in 130 countries around the world. Now here's the kicker. We don't sell to markets. Markets are inanimate objects. We sell to people. So if in the 130 countries, China is one country, China is a continent, by the way, huh? It's not a country. It's how many cultures? How many cultures? How many cultural references? And if you're selling products in China, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in Brazil, in Russia, how are you going to do to convince 1 billion of these people extra, because you already have just over 1 billion already, how are you going to convince the next billion that they should buy your products rather than buy somebody else's? What is it that somebody in Bangladesh, somebody in Pakistan, somebody in Brazil, somebody in China, what do they share in common? Because when it comes to a common set of values, let me tell you, we're not nearly as homogeneous as some people would like to think. We discussed this over lunch, how inhomogeneous we are when it comes to values. Think about it for a second, because it is, just to put it into perspective. Imagine that in Pakistan, under a fatwa, you take somebody's life in a premeditated way. What is the result? Paradise, guaranteed. Okay? In France, in a premeditated way, you take somebody's life. What happens? The French state will incarcerate you for the rest of your life. In a premeditated way, you take somebody's life in the state of Texas, what will happen? The state of Texas will take your life as retribution for having taken the life of somebody else. Let me tell you, when it comes to something as fundamental as the value of human life, we don't agree. So if you're coming along with your SKU of Fructis or Maybelline mascara or whatever it is, but it's the big question. Let me tell you, you guys heard all about growth potential in China yesterday. The real question is, how are you going to do? How are you going to convince those people? In other words, what we're convinced of, the question is a question of acceptability. If your way of doing business is not acceptable to these folks, then you're not going to make sales. You don't make sales, you don't make profits. You don't make profits, game is over. How do you build that acceptability? We are convinced that the key to acceptability, the keys, if you wish, first and foremost, it's performance. You sell people stuff that works. Performance. Improving little by little their daily lives. But there's also innovation, that this year's version even better than last year's version. And next year will probably be even better again. Performance with innovation. That the environmental impact of this product has been taken into consideration from its very conception. that the human safety of this product was taken into consideration from its very conception, that whatever advertisement was used to bring that product to the attention of the consumer was a sincere advertisement, that whatever claims that were made for that product are substantiated by recognized scientific methods, and that if somebody's not happy, they can call somebody who's well-trained, who's polite, knows what they're talking about, and can either explain what the consumer is doing wrong, or if they're really not happy, help them to get their money back. We call it corporate consumer responsibility. We have an entire chapter in our sustainability report about it. But it's the B-above sustainability. And the key to building the acceptability of your business practices across the globe, and therefore grow your business across the globe. Now, I've got to be careful here because I only got 10 minutes more to go. And if we don't get to the end, we don't get to the end, it doesn't matter. But essentially, you know, if that's, I would say, the higher level view, you could ask yourself, so, you know, what in concrete terms, Francis, starts to happen here, okay? Essentially, you look at two things. You look at the strategic management of your raw materials. We touched on that briefly. We're going to look at it now again in a minute. And you look at something maybe you know, maybe a little bit less familiar with, what are called your intangible value drivers. Now, when it comes to your strategic raw materials, it's actually very simple. You have two kinds of risks when it comes to your ingredients. One is actually getting them in the first place, right? And the more you have, the more you use, well, the harder it is to get them and to secure your supply chain. The second is the questions linked to the environmental impact or human health and safety issues around those ingredients. And in both of those cases, the more ingredients you have, the more difficult it is to handle. And that's why we have a program which basically its objective is to look at what is necessary and sufficient. Necessary for that performance and the innovation that we talked about earlier on, then stop. And think about it for a minute. Once you've selected out those premium ingredients that give you your performance necessary and sufficient, after that then, the management of all these ingredients becomes an awful lot easier because there's simply far less of them. Less supply chains to secure. Much easier to look into product safety. But also, if you have a factory, if instead of putting 30 ingredients into your cream, now you're only putting 15, well, it's 15 less to buy, 15 less to store, 15 less to weigh. Everybody wins. Yeah? So necessary and sufficient with your premium quality ingredients. First of all. The second one, as I say, is one maybe you're a little bit less familiar with. It's the intangible value drivers. You have two basic kinds. The first one is your human and intellectual capital. What does that mean? Good and smart folks. The second one is your relationship with your stakeholders. Now you could ask yourself, Francis, how would you measure those kinds of things? And I say, don't need to. Make a saving. Because there are all sorts of folks out there who do it for me. Even some of them present in the room today, who measure me on this. So for example, this one comes from a group called Innovest, a Canadian crowd. What do we have here? We have impact on financial performance. So this is not some tree-hugging thing, okay? Impact on financial performance. What do we have here? Performance of company. What do we have up here? Human and intellectual capital. How many good and smart, ethical, responsible people do they have in the company? That's what it means, huh? Environment. Stakeholder capital, in other words, your reputation. Strategic governance. Get measured on it every day. And you know what? So do you. So do you. Yeah? It's something that is central to the value of your business. It's something that is central to how well your business performs. Now, just in case anybody has any doubt as to what these intangible values are worth, okay? You all know a company is composed, the value of a company is composed of two parts. The tangible part, that's everything you can sell. You know, factories, cars, computers, machines, whatever, yeah? And the rest is the intangible part. So, I took the numbers away deliberately because I just want to concentrate on the ratios. Here we have a couple of companies that I'm sure you all know. Coca-Cola. Here's the total value of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has 400 factories. 400. Almost every refrigerator in the world that has the words Coca-Cola written on it belongs to Coca-Cola. So they own about 10 million fridges as well. They have huge tangible assets. This is the total value of the company. These are the tangible assets. The rest is what? know what the rest is? The rest is, psh. That's what the rest is. When you open that can, it goes, psh, and you know exactly what you're getting. And on the rare occasion when it's not exactly what you want, it's because you forgot to put it in the fridge. It's your fault. If you'd put it in the fridge, you know it would have went psh, just like it should have. It's 90% of the value of the company is what it is. It's 90% of the value of a company that has 10 million fridges and 400 factories. J&J is almost the same. So is P&G. You know, L'Oreal is not that different. L'Oreal Paris, just by itself, the brand L'Oreal Paris is 40% of our total. Just to give you an idea. We're the same. Most companies are. You would say, well, what's wrong with Unilever? Okay, and everybody knows the answer to this one. The problem with Unilever is that the yellow one's not big enough. Why is it not big enough? It's easy. Too many brands. Far too many brands. They have hundreds and hundreds of brands. There's too many. So it's difficult to build your intangible assets when you've got too many brands, and that's the only reason why Unilever is not in the same configuration as everybody else. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we talked a lot about this over lunch, and I can't go into details, but if anybody wants to talk about it afterwards, we can. You have got to do this, what's called savoir-faire and faire savoir. Know how and let know. We had a very interesting exercise over lunchtime where somebody who didn't know a whole lot about our company, well, learned a whole lot. A whole lot of things that, you know, maybe that person didn't know were actually in the company. And I am sure that when you go back to your companies as well, that you have experts, you have all sorts of stuff that's going on, you simply never told anybody. Because, you know, we can always find an excuse. Point being that in today's world, if you're not talking about it, people will assume, well, you're just not doing it. Because there's so many people out there talking about it and they're not doing anything at all. So if you're not even talking about it, how bad must you be? Yeah? Know how and let know. And it works across the board, whether you're talking about it at a corporate level, B2B, B2C, research and development, across the board. So, yeah, of course.
Where does L'Oreal stand in the tangible, non-tangible?
Yeah, ours is about 80%. Ours is about 80. So we're like J&J. But for example, if you're Chanel, anybody here from Chanel? No? Because Chanel is a good example. Chanel number 5, you all know, right? Key ingredient in Chanel number 5, the fixer. Fixer is called Peau Rasa. Where does Peau Rasa come from? Well, it happens to come from way upstream in Amazonia. Right? So one place. Already, great idea to have an ingredient that only comes from one single place, right? Way up in the back of beyonds of Amazonia. And Chanel have been buying Peau Rasa for years, almost 100 years. A bunch of English NGOs discover that Chanel gets Peau Rasa from up in the Amazon and there's nowhere else to get it. So they go up the Amazon to explain to the local Indians what their bunch of flowers is worth if you actually mix it with alcohol and sell it in a duty-free in Dubai. To help things along, they then spread this all over the newspapers, the broadsheets in the UK, that basically Chanel is being unfair. I'm being politically correct in the choice of my words here, but they're being unfair to the Indians in Amazonia. So the Indians decide they're not selling the flower to Chanel anymore. Chanel's intangible assets, their reputation, are more than 90% the value of the company. Chanel is essentially intangible assets and almost nothing else. A couple of buildings, and that's it. So what do? You get down on your knees is what you do. And you start negotiating as quick as you can. Because you don't have any cards to play. Which is exactly what they did. Yeah? So, now, just to, maybe because that's all a little bit serious, just to lighten things up a little bit before I finish, I want to give you just a couple of examples before I leave you, all right? This comes from the luxury goods business, but, you know, what the hell, they're good folks too, right? This is Häagen-Dazs. Huh? This is Häagen-Dazs, so it's luxury ice cream. Now, just in case anybody has any doubts, that luxury and luxury ice cream, Francis, okay? Who rebuilt Gucci? Robert Pollitt. Yeah, okay? Robert Pollitt rebuilt Gucci. And who did Robert Pollitt work for before he worked for Gucci? He worked for Unilever. And what part of Unilever? Ice cream, okay? Ice cream and luxury go back a long way. So, here we have Häagen-Dazs luxury ice cream. The ice cream is called 5. How many ingredients in the ice cream? 5. How many did Eugene Schuler have in his first formula?
25.
He had 6. Somebody did remember because I heard him saying it from over in the corner. Thank you, sir. 5 ingredients in ice cream. Let me tell you, I'm a physicist. Making ice cream with only 5 ingredients is tough. The secret is in what's called a double extrusion process. It's real high tech, but who cares? That's Haagen-Dazs's problem. They make it out of 5 ingredients. Now, what are the 5 ingredients? Stay with me here. Look, milk, cream, eggs, sugar, and if you're going for mint, you get some mint. How could that possibly be dangerous? How many NGOs are you going to have climbing outside your building, or how many regulators are going to start complaining about using eggs, sugar, milk, what else is in there? Mint and some cream. Not a whole lot. You understand? You're putting harm at a great distance. In fact, you're putting harm so far away, they turn around and they make a health claim for ice cream. Look, all natural ice cream crafted with only 5 ingredients for incredibly pure, balanced, and surprisingly less fat. Ice cream is good for your health. I think it's an amazing example of how you can actually build something very serious, very sustainable, and from a business perspective, extremely interesting. Let me show you another one. Chocolate mousse. And here we go. 2 brands of chocolate mousse. So which one are you going to buy? If anybody here work in a factory, which one would you rather manufacture? Anybody here working in supply chain, which one would you rather buy the ingredients for? I mean, it's pretty obvious. What's all this? You know, what's all this? Yeah. There's a guy who wrote a really good book called La Simplexité, which is the whole idea. How many people in the room here have smartphones? Well, it's got to be everybody, right? I guess. How many of you have read the instructions? Seriously. Now, isn't that an amazing thing? Nobody. Of course you didn't. Mine was sold to me, didn't even have instructions. Got some BlackBerry thing, it didn't even come with an instruction booklet. You know? And yet these are incredibly complex machines, but they're not complex to you. The complexity, that's BlackBerry or Apple or Samsung, that's their job, or Nokia, whoever. Yeah? Not your problem. And Simplexity, Alan Bertaux's book is all about that. It's a good read. Study done by WWF, luxury goods business. The most sustainable, socially and environmentally sustainable luxury goods company in the world. You'll never guess who that was. It's L'Oreal. It's L'Oreal. Even the people at L'Oreal didn't know. I had to bring it to their attention. Seriously. That just goes how far things can go. That you have the NGOs with 2 researchers, one of which is from Yale University, an outstanding US academic, write a very serious report in which they rank you the world's #1 luxury goods company, and nobody knew. So how important do you think would it be for the employees in your company if the same report had been written? How proud do you think they would be? Make them maybe feel a bit better about themselves, getting up early in the morning, going to work and working so hard. How important do you think it might be for a prospective client or a supplier that you might want to get on board? Or a stakeholder group that you want to show that you're serious and responsible folks? You've got to let people know. It doesn't mean that you spin stories. It doesn't mean that you're not transparent. It doesn't mean you don't have the facts to back up what you say. You need all of those things. But you do have to let people know. It won't happen spontaneously. So what does all that mean? All of that just to say 2 last things. 1, companies are organisms. They are born, they grow and develop, and then get complacent and slow, get cancer, and they die. The average age of a company in the United States in 1950 was 75 years. The average age of a company in the United States in the year 2000 was 15. Only General Electric is on the Dow Jones today from day 1. L'Oreal has been here for 101 years. We want to be here for at least another 100 years. Well, it's going to take a great deal of work. Because in fact, you know, according to Mama Nature, you know, 100 years is already quite a lot, right? So we're going to have to work very hard. So are all of your companies. Don't think just because you're doing well today that your success or even your existence is guaranteed. You're going to have to work hard for it. Now, when it comes to working hard for it, if I could make a couple of recommendations to you, take it or leave it. But I would say the first thing is that your knowledge of market, of course, but also society. That couplet, market and society, that's the key asset. the premium asset that you need to leverage. Yeah? Don't become dogmatic that, of course, everybody in our company has the same DNA, but you still have local context. So you need to be able to speak local language. It's very important as well. And the last thing is, good ideas. Anybody can have a good idea when it comes to sustainability. So make sure that you get everybody on board. Sustainability is not about the work of the sustainability department. It's either happening in your company, throughout the company, or it's actually not happening at all. You're deluding yourself. And so anybody can have a good idea. And I'm going to give you 3 examples, and it'll be the last thing that I'll say this afternoon. First one comes from a Japanese guy. Hidei was his name. Mr. Hidei has 2 passions in life. 1, Mozart, 2, jogging. So Mr. Hidei, he's the chief executive officer of a company at the time called Sony, goes to see his engineers and says, hey guys, can you not make me a device so I can listen to Mozart while I jog? The engineers reply, boss, there's no market for such a device. And Hidei, he replies, I'm the market. Very famous reply. So what did Mr. Hidei invent? He invented the Walkman, yes he did. But what he really invented, he invented mobile entertainment. That's what Mr. Hidei invented. He invented mobile entertainment. So when you're going home tonight in your car, listening on your iPhone to whatever it is music you like, you think of Mr. Hidei. He invented mobile entertainment. That's what he really invented. And he was the chief executive officer. So chief executive officers can have good ideas. Okay? It's important, huh? Second example. In English, vacuum cleaner is also referred to as a Hoover, after Mr. Edward Hoover, who made himself extremely wealthy manufacturing Hoovers. But where did Mr. Edward Hoover, where did he get the idea for his Hoover? For his first vacuum cleaner? He bought the patent from somebody. He bought the patent from a man called James Spangler. And James Spangler was actually an employee. He worked at this guy Hoover's engineering firm. And what was his job? He was a night watchman. He turned off the lights and closed the doors at nighttime, except in the weekends, well, he's a bit of an inventor. Bit of an inventor, if you wish, yeah? Well, so what did Mr. Spangler invent? He invented, of course, the Hoover, but especially what he invented was domestic appliances. Very simple, functional devices that make life real easy in the home. That's what he invented. Right? The third and final example comes from France. McDonald's, France. You've got to wind the clock back just a little bit. Not that long, but a little bit. We have the head of McDonald's France, a man called Denny Hennequin. And Denny, well, he was in a difficult situation because Denny had a couple of problems going on. First of all, he was selling, American fast food in the world's gastronomic capital. So not necessarily an easy sell, if you wish. Okay? That was the first problem Denny had. Second problem that Denny had was that he was selling hamburgers, and there was a thing called mad cow disease that was making newspapers all over the world. Third problem that he had was he had a national anti-obesity campaign, and he was selling cheap, sugary drinks to kids. He also had a group of José Bové and company who had decided that McDonald's was the devil incarnate when it came to GMOs. So they kept dumping, heaps of corn into the McDonald's stores. He had his suppliers who were refusing to sell him their goods because they felt they weren't being paid a fair price. And if that wasn't enough, he also had a group of terrorists. You'll remember this, the French people here. They started blowing the restaurants up. There was actually a girl was killed. One of the employees of McDonald's was killed down in Po when they blew up one of the restaurants. Yeah? And if that wasn't enough, he had the guys in Los Angeles saying, Denny, plus 10% next year, otherwise, game over. So, and if you meet Denny, he's a really nice man. If you meet Denny and discuss him, he'll tell you, he was thinking to himself, I'm going to die if I don't do something here. Huh? I'm going to die. It's simply not possible, right? So what does Denny do? First thing, ingredients. Rewrite all the menus. When you walk into McDonald's, wherever it is in the world today, and you find fresh fruit and salad, that's Denny's legacy. He rewrote all the menus for McDonald's, got in the top experts in dietary science, sat down and renegotiated with the farmers for supply chain and get some proper practices into place and start paying them a fair price. Decided that McDonald's would go GMO-free, first one in the world, first McDonald's country in the world to go GMO-free. All of a sudden, José Bové and company thought he was God Almighty, Jesus Christ. And police eventually caught the terrorists. Mad cow disease eventually under control because we banned those animal feeds. And what happened? Today, second country in the world in terms of turnover for McDonald's after the United States is here. Yeah, right? That's what I'm saying. Ingredients, reputation, intangible assets. Okay? Now, Denny was then promoted to become the head of McDonald's Europe, as you would imagine. And then when last year they refused to make him head of McDonald's tout court, then he left. He now works for the Accor Hotel Group, who actually may be the owners of this place. Yeah? All of that to let you know that when I'm talking to you about sustainability as a roadmap to grow our company, we're a serious company, it's serious business, this is our roadmap. And if you have any questions at all, I'd be very happy to take them. Thank you much indeed. Thank you. Sorry, I went way over. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much, Francis, for this outstanding and fascinating presentation. We may have a few questions in the room. Please. Yes.
I have one question. So you say you're going to reach another billion I can do both. You're going to reach another billion consumers within the next 10 years. You're not only going to do it with ingredients and going sustainable and getting less ingredients. There's obviously different strategies to it, right?
Well, I think
it's not working.
No way. No, it's not working. I'll do this one. The question of going out and gaining the loyalty and trust of a billion new consumers, for us, the entry, the portal, is acceptability. And acceptability is about the way you handle your business, the way, the ingredients that you put in, the choices that you make. Because remember, at the end of the day, what you give the person is a product that contains all of these ingredients. So you know what their environmental impact is. You know what their safety profile is. You know that it gives performance. Yeah? And that the advertising that you use is responsible. These are the elements that are all around the product, because the product is what you sell. These are the elements that build your acceptability. And as I say, the reason why acceptability is so important is that if people don't accept, if they reject you, then you can do all the advertising that you want. You're not going to get very far. Yeah, it's really the primary entry point into the company. And then, as a company, then you want to be absolutely sure that you're doing the right thing and that people know about it and that you have a good reputation. But also, you want to make sure that you have the best employees in your company. If we're selling in 130 countries around the world, we have about 113 nationalities in the company, in the management teams. Has to be. You can't have a whole bunch of guys from the Corrèze, okay, designing beauty products for the entire world. It just doesn't work. Yeah. So getting those people in with that diversity becomes key, and not only getting them in, but keeping them. Because if you have Jean-Pierre, who has this, the red tie with a really tight knot here, who's been in the company 25 years, and all of a sudden you say, well, here's Jamal, who comes from Karachi, who's a wizard at God knows what, and Jean-Pierre, this is a real favor that we're doing for you, that you have this guy, and he's going, whoa, how are we supposed to work together? Yeah, you'll have Jamal, but he'll leave in 6 months' time saying, you guys are crazy. So what do? Well, you make diversity training obligatory for all of your managers, every last single one of them. We're at 96%. 96% of our managers in the company have done the training program on how to recognize diversity as an opportunity. It's a full 2-day program. And that's how you build your human capital, your intellectual capital, and not only draw people into the company, but keep them when you get them in. All of those things, they all add up together.
Any other remarks, question? Yes?
Okay, it works. What is the importance of reaching your goal of 1 billion new consumers if you look at becoming more local? Because L'Oréal is a global company and most of the brands are global. What is the role of becoming more local in gaining new consumers, or if there is one at all?
There is one, yeah, for sure. Our industrial policy is to manufacture locally. So the 38 plants that we have are scattered all over the world. And that becomes very important because it means that you're part of the local scene. Because we have local manufacturing, but also local supply chain. And we do them all to the same standard. In other words, the supply chain that we have in China is run to the same quality and standards as the supply chain we have in France. And trust me, it takes time.
I mean,
Formulation-wise.
Are you going to have different ingredients for the different?
Okay. Sorry. Okay then. Formulation-wise, we have research centers. We have 18 research centers in all. At the moment, we're building new research center in Brazil, new research center in India. We've just tripled the size of the one in China. We also have what are called evaluation centers. Now, evaluation centers are complementary to a research center. In a research center, you look at performance of a product. In other words, that for the local hair type, for the local skin type, that you've got it characterized, analyzed, that you have formulas that are adapted, some even tailor-made to that and developed locally. In the evaluation center, what you're looking at is how these products are applied, what's called the geocosmetics, the local rituals and the local way of going about apprehending things, which in the end becomes just as important because remember, your final offer to the consumer is composed of performance plus meaning, sense. So these two are linked together, and this we're doing at a local level and becoming even more local. And what we're seeing at the moment is, for example, products that we developed in China, in our Chinese research center, now starting to make the long journey back and being launched in Europe, being launched in the US. Whereas at the very beginning, of course, it was the vast majority of products had been developed in Europe and the US, and that were being, readapted locally. Now we're actually starting to see products developed in these countries, making the journey backwards.
We take a final question.
Good morning, Stéphanie Puel,
There
Firmenich.
will be another one.
Hi. Well, I was impressed by all your model you explained us regarding, the way your guy enters the formulation in the computer and has directly the impact, the total impact on environment. Can you tell us more about it and how does it work? In which kind of unit of measurement is it done, and which kind of what are the most impactful ingredients at the end?
We can go into the details maybe offline, but basically for the people in the room, essentially what it is that the regulations, the cosmetic regulations say that all cosmetic products, whether they're rinse off or not, end up in water, right? So you're looking at aqueous medium. What we did was we built a 3-tier model ecosystem. So we have microalgae, Daphne, and then you have sac-fry, fish, okay? And so each one of these species, when you put it into a medium in which there's an ingredient, they accumulate. The microalgae, they're filter feeders, so they accumulate. They get eaten in big quantities by the Daphne, who build it up inside of them, and the Daphne get eaten by the little fish. And so the ingredients are constantly being accumulated and built up inside the organism. And then what you do then is you look at the one that is the most sensitive to that ingredient, and whatever threshold, so the worst case scenario that you get in terms of threshold, you then multiply that by a factor of 100. So you give yourself a factor of 100 margin compared to the worst case scenario, and that's what comes up on the screen. So you're setting yourself so far away from what could be a problem, you're really, you're pretty safe afterwards. Okay. And then those methods, as I say, developed with the OECD, and they're now the official standardized methods anyway. Thank you.
Alex, you get the final question.
Just a quick question about your position or L'Oréal's position about open innovation.
Oh, that's not a good one. It may last for a long time.
It won't last for a long time. I have to apologize because I promised I would mention it. Yeah, open innovation is an important part because why? Because you cannot have all of those resources internally. Right? It's a program that I participate in setting up myself, so I do know a lot about it. So we're using several kinds of platforms that are targeted with specific questions to specific experts, others that are more like innocentive, where it's just, where you just throw it into a big pot and cauldron and see what comes out. But also we have things like Marketplace, where you have people coming from, especially as I was saying, alluding to these, new technologies coming from the research centers that are, no longer Europe-centric or North America-centric, coming to Marketplace, sharing those ideas, the brands picking up the best ideas. And we also have things like, we have what's called a cherry picking program. That's where we invite our suppliers to come in, okay, and to present at the same time to all the brands, all of the different technologies. Yeah, and that way then people that you would normally not see in the usual way you go about business, brands or in divisions that you wouldn't normally see them as well and get that mixed up. It's extremely important.